So this is 7.5 money lessons I wish I learned sooner. Lesson number 1. Immediate gratification is expensive. I remember when I first started earning money, like a proper salary, my first job ever. All of a sudden, I had all this cash to spend. That's what it felt like. That wasn't actually reality. But it felt like I had so much money in my bank account, so much freedom. I kept thinking to myself, wow, I am grown and independent. I was feeling myself. And every swipe came with a dopamine hit. Every swipe just came with like a, oh, that feels good. Oh, that feels good. Buying the stuff that I just couldn't when I was in uni and on a very tight student budget. This immediate gratification started to feel almost like a reward. Like, I deserve it. I've earned this money, therefore I deserve to spend it. Which is fair. You've earned your money. You should spend it accordingly. But what I was doing was just throwing patience out the window. Anytime I saw something that I wanted, I'd get it immediately. I'd get it at that moment. Like, waiting felt painful. And in my mind, I justified it with, I'm a working girl now. I've got money, so I can spend it. Here's the thing that I've learned. Every time I rushed to make a purchase because I wanted it immediately, I often didn't even get the best deal for it. So many times I've bought something and then weeks later I see it on sale. If I waited, I'd have got 25% off. I'll give you an example. Apple just released their iPhone 16 range. It's taken everything in my power, friend, to not go for an upgrade. But realistically, I don't need it. My phone is perfectly fine. But every time Apple comes out and they've got these light shows and like showcasing the new phone and all these things, if I did need a phone, it would make perfect sense to wait for Black Friday or even Cyber Monday to then make that purchase, as opposed to queuing. No shade to anyone, but queuing for the latest iPhone the day that it drops. Do you see what I mean? I think immediate gratification tricks us into thinking something is an amazing deal when it's really not. And it's so easy to convince yourself that something's a deal. You know how when you go into a supermarket and you don't actually need anything, but then it's 25% off and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, you're thinking of all the ways and all the reasons to convince yourself that you actually need the thing, but you didn't. You only want it because it's apparently 25% off. Is that you? Am I calling you out? Because that's me. That is very me. Another thing that I've learned about this desire and this need to have a thing and to have it now is that I never actually was giving myself the chance to think. All I wanted to do was add to cart, add to cart, add to cart. I wasn't actually thinking, do I need this thing? How am I going to use this thing? How often am I going to use this thing? And me and Amazon, we have a very close relationship. I'm on there a lot. It's a bit embarrassing. But I realized that sometimes the excitement just comes from adding the thing to the cart. So I'll see a thing that I think I want, I'll add it to my cart, and then I'll just leave it there. And oftentimes I forget about it and I'll come back a week later and see it there and I'm like, what the heck is this? Some of them are so dumb. I've got dog toys in there. I don't even have a dog. In the past, I've actually used credit cards to satisfy this urge to buy now. And I think that's when I realized this is becoming a bit of a problem, because I don't have the cash in hand, but I'm willing to use borrowed cash to get this thing that I haven't really thought through fully. And then obviously on the back end of that, I need to pay back the credit card with interest. And so if you think about it, I was paying extra money for being impatient. Once I saw it like that, I was like, nah, this has to end. If I don't have the money to buy something here and now, it's just not getting bought. You don't actually need anything right now, do you? You know what I mean? Like, aside from your basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter, do you actually need anything right now, or do you just want it? If you're like me, you probably just want it. Lesson number 2, having an emergency fund is absolutely essential. Over 1/3 of Brits have less than £1,000 saved for emergencies. And 1 in 5, so 20% of us, have no savings at all. Think about that. Isn't that so scary? Considering what we all went through in 2020, we know that having a good buffer of savings is so important, because you never know what's around the corner. Who could have predicted that, you know? Without having a savings buffer in place, any unexpected expense can very quickly turn into a financial crisis. And here's the truth, in moments like this, an emergency fund is often the only thing standing between you and rock bottom. So if, for instance, your living expenses come up to £2,000, then your emergency fund should have between £6,000 and £12,000 safely tucked away just in case you need it. If you get lucky, you could go through life and never have to use it, but if you're a regular schmegular person like me, you'll definitely have to use it. Last year, my mom actually got really sick really suddenly, and my mom doesn't live in the UK. And so within a matter of days, I literally had to book flights, book accommodation, figure out work, and just disappear. If I didn't have an emergency fund, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And it wouldn't have been great. Even the pandemic showed us how life can just completely change overnight. Jobs were put on hold, businesses were paused, and having a safety net gave people time to adjust without panicking about bills the next day. Now, we were quite lucky in the UK that the government almost was our safety net. We had this furlough system where people were getting paid 80% of their salary and advised to stay home from work. A lot of other people in lots of other countries didn't have that. And so if you didn't have any savings, whale. The real value of an emergency fund is having freedom from financial stress. So you basically know that you've built yourself a cushion, and this will let you respond to any curveballs that life throws at you with relative ease. It'll still be difficult, but at least money won't be a thing that you're worrying about. I think at the end of the day, an emergency fund is so much more than just money in a savings account. Truly, it's peace of mind, and that is worth every penny. Okay, moving on to lesson number 3. Your community shapes your money mindset. You've probably heard the saying that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And in today's world, that circle isn't just in person, it's also digital. So thanks to social media, keeping up with the Joneses isn't just about your next door neighbors anymore. People are in your feed showing you their latest designer purchases, their latest luxury vacations, and it's only natural to want to keep up. I think we live in a time when consumption is so front and center. Maybe it's because of the visibility of it, like, hey, come with me to purchase this, or hey, unbox this with me. Like, it's so normalized in our society to buy things and to see people buying things, and then to feel like, well, if I don't have the thing, what's wrong with me? It's almost impossible right now to be scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook and not see an ad. It feels like every second post is actually an ad convincing you, hey, buy this thing, and if you can't afford it, you can buy now and pay later. It's become so easy to splurge with money you don't even have yet. So here's my key takeaway. I've learned that I need to be so intentional with how I craft my feed, with how I craft my social media. I've had to unfollow accounts that encourage constant spending, or accounts that make me feel less than for not having this designer item or that designer item, which is crazy because I'm not even into designer items like that. But you keep seeing here's a tour of my bag closet, or here's a tour of my shoe closet, and I'm like, shoe closet? I've got a shelf. I've got a shoe shelf. And that's okay. Instead, I follow creators and friends who inspire me to grow as a person, to develop my skills, to be mindful of the environment, to get my money up. I'm learning to curate a feed that supports my goals rather than encourages me to just flush my very hard-earned money down the toilet. My digital environment shapes my mindset just as much, if not more, than my physical environment. So what I have on my feed, what I have on my social media, it can either help me grow and stay on track with my goals, or it can keep me perpetually reaching for my credit card to buy things that I don't care about, to impress people that I don't even like. Moving on to lesson number 4, lifestyle creep is sneaky and dangerous. So starting off, what is lifestyle creep? Basically, as your income rises, your lifestyle tends to rise to match it. And so the more you earn, the more the expenses associated with your living costs also tend to rise. This has been 100% the case for me. I'm not necessarily proud of it, and I didn't actually realize for the longest time. I wore it as a badge of honor. Like, I'm earning more now, so, I should have a nicer this or a nicer that. I've seen some of my friends do this with cars. I'm earning more now, so I should upgrade my car. Yet your current car is perfectly fine. Like, I'm earning more now, I should have a better phone. I'm earning more now, I need a designer work bag. It really snuck up on me, and I was living in this cycle where my expenses and my spending habits were literally dictating my life. Honestly, I started becoming a slave to my own choices. Nobody put me in this situation. I got myself into this mess. The biggest issue that I found with lifestyle creep is this realization that I'm trapped. If I want to pursue another career, or if I want to even venture out on my own and start my own business, I'm in trouble because I'd basically have to find a role or find a business that matches my expenses to a T. And that's difficult when your expenses are overly inflated for no particular reason other than you have the money. There's been times where I've seen a role or I've seen a job that I'm like, oh, I'd like to try this out, but it pays significantly less. Am I ready to take a pay cut? Not necessarily, because if I do, I'm not going to be able to survive. Purely because my current lifestyle is just, the expenses are higher than they need to be. So not me ending up in a position where my current lifestyle is actually keeping me tethered to a job that I'm not in love with. A prison of my own making. A literal prison of my own making. And this is a thing in general. Living right at your means, aka where your income and your expenses are like bar for bar. It's tricky because of this. You get trapped. If you need to leave, if you want to change roles, if you want to change jobs, it's tricky unless you find a job that pays exactly that or higher. Which could be the case sometimes, but sometimes you want to start over in a different industry where the pay would go down. So now your income would be here and your expenses are here. What's the plan? I've since taken steps to bring this back down to make sure I'm living way below my means so that if ever an opportunity comes up that I want to pursue, even if it pays less, then I can do that and know that I'll be okay. And a bonus, living below your means you have extra buffer, right? So if your expenses are here and your income is here, this extra space in between, you can save that for a rainy day. You can invest that for your future. There's no losing. If I think about some of the world's wealthiest individuals, they don't flaunt their wealth and their riches. They don't inflate their lifestyle to a level that's obscene. Let's exclude the rappers, the entertainers, the performers, because their appearance, wearing their wealth, is good for their brand and for their image, and it's how they make more wealth. That's not the group of people that we're talking about here. Wearing your wealth on you or having status symbols as you rise up in your career and as you get older, it's a signifier that you're doing well, and we want to be seen and we want to be perceived as doing well, right? But there's limits to that. Draw a line in the sand and say, this is sufficient for me. This is enough for me to live a good quality of life where I can still enjoy my life but also save for my future. The thing is, for me, being wealthy in the future is more important than looking wealthy in the present. If that resonates with you, then resisting this urge to chase trends right now will give you a chance to make sure that your financial future is well within your control. Lesson number 5: automate payments, savings, and investments. Most of us have direct debits set up, right? So anytime your bills are due, they just automatically leave your account and go to whichever vendor you're supposed to pay. But for some reason, we don't do this for our savings and our investments. Yet the benefit is the same. It just gives you peace of mind. It takes away the thought behind it. It removes mental barriers. It's just done. It needs to get done, therefore it gets done. The idea behind all this is to pay yourself first. Now, this is a common phrase in the world of finance. It's not new, but I was ignoring it. I had to reframe it in my head. This is all about prioritizing future me before I start spending on current me. Each month, as soon as I'm paid, as soon as my paycheck hits my bank account, a set amount leaves and goes into my different savings account automatically. I don't have to touch it. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to, go back and forth with myself about what else I could do with that money. It's just gone. And for as long as it's gone and I didn't have to think about it, there's this just mental barrier that I don't have to overcome. There's this mental hurdle that I don't have to overcome. It's done. In the same way that when I pay Scottish Power for my gas and electric bill, I don't think about it. It's gone. The direct debit is taken. It's not on my mind. It's done. It's finished. Rather than having a savings account that just is titled savings account, I started naming my savings account. So I split out my savings and I named them house deposit savings, trip to Kenya savings, new phone savings, whatever you're saving for. I just broke it out and I named it. What this does is it makes it less likely for me to go into my savings account and withdraw money from it. When it was unnamed, when it was just called savings account, I would go in all the time and just pull money out of there because I didn't know what I was saving for, and so it didn't matter. Whereas now, if I've got a savings account called new phone, I'm not going to go and pull money from there because I know that I'm going to need that for my new phone in the future. And it stings. It stings to take money out of there to go shopping in Zara when I know that I'm going to need to upgrade my phone soon because mine's dying. Or if I've got a holiday planned and I've got a savings account for this holiday, I'm not going to go and pull from there because I know I need to book a flight and I need to book accommodation and have some money to spend when I go on holiday. Spending it now jeopardizes the thing that I've been saving for. This lesson is almost twofold. It's the automating your savings and then giving your savings account a very specific name, which means that you're not going to go and pull from it because in your mind you know exactly what you're saving for and you don't want to mess that up. This approach doesn't just work for my savings, I use it for my investments as well. So again, every month a set amount leaves my bank account and goes into my investment portfolio. Don't think about it, I don't see it, I don't have time to ruminate over it, it just does. And by doing this, I'm normalizing this idea of setting myself up for the future. I'm normalizing this idea of creating wealth for the future version of me. And it feels good. It feels really, really good. Lesson number 6, how much time is your money worth? This one is simple, but it's so surprisingly powerful. It still blows my mind to this day. Basically what you do is you take your monthly income and you divide it by the number of hours that you work in a month. And once you do that division, you end up with a pounds per hour rate. This is basically how much you get paid for every hour of work you do, okay? Now you have this number, hold this number in your head. Now every time you're considering a purchase, ask yourself, how many hours of work am I trading for this particular item? Let's say I earn £10 an hour and I would like a new MacBook that costs £1,000. So I would take the cost of the MacBook, which is £1,000, and divide it by how much I earn per hour, which is £10. And that gives me 100. So I'm trading 100 hours of work to get this MacBook. I'm not here to say whether it's worth it or not, but for me personally, it really helped me stop and think before certain purchases. Is 150 hours of work worth this thing that I'm considering buying? A lot of times the answer was no. Sometimes the answer was yes, and I went through with the purchase, but a lot of times it was like, I need to work so many hours to get this thing. Am I gonna get enough use out of it? Is it worth it? Did I get it just because I saw someone have it? Or do I truly need it? All these questions started coming into my head and it's a real deterrent. It really stops you in your tracks and has you think, okay, is this a sensible purchase? Is this a sensible thing to do. Aside from deterring you from making really big purchases that you probably don't need to be making, this hack is also really good for, making you think strategically about your future and your finances and how those two things go hand in hand. For instance, if you find yourself buying a coffee every morning on the way to work, you might say, I'm spending so many hours worth of my labor to buy these coffees. Why don't I take those hours of my labor and buy a coffee machine for home instead? Then I can make my own coffees from home every day, and eventually this coffee machine will pay itself off. Now I get to have my favorite espresso or cappuccino every morning guilt-free for way less than it would cost me to buy it from the coffee shop. And even in terms of past spending, sometimes I look at a thing and I'm like, I spent 200 work hours to buy this thing and I'm not using it. And in the cases of some items like my laptop and my phone, I think they were worth all the work hours that I traded to get them, because so far they've given me so much more in return. This is just a good way to gauge, what do I have to trade to get this thing? And what is it giving me in return based on what I spent on it? Not just in terms of money, but in terms of time. Moving on to lesson number 7, budgets give you freedom. When I first started budgeting, I just thought this is prison. This is prison. This is tying me and my money up in chains. I don't like it. Every single cell in my body was just like, this is a waste of space. I don't want to do it. I just thought it was such a tight-fisted way of living. I thought it was just saying no to all the good stuff, all the fun stuff that I loved, just to save a few quid. This was around the time when YOLO was such a popular saying, like, you only live once, and that was me. Budget for who? YOLO. Like, hey, I've barely got any money left. Do you wanna go out? Yes, YOLO, YOLO, YOLO. I YOLO'd myself into just financial stupidity, honestly. That's the best way to put it. All because I didn't understand exactly what a budget was and how to make a good one. See, what I didn't realize at the time is budgets don't limit my freedom, they give me it. They give me my freedom. If I'm honest, at the time, the only reason my budget didn't work for me was my fault. I basically wasn't including any line items in my budget to account for fun. Nothing. There was nothing fun in my budget. I didn't budget for enjoyment. I didn't budget for takeaways on a Friday. I didn't budget for nights out with the girls. I didn't budget for weekend getaways. I didn't budget for little shopping treats. I budgeted just for expenses, and the rest I chucked into savings, and I was miserable. It was literally all work, no play. So of course I was rebelling against it. Of course every fiber in my being was like, this is hell, get it away from me. Realizing that, hey, I get to control and dictate the budget, and so I decide what goes in there. That one tiny change made all the difference. So now I think of my budget as a map for my money. Google Maps, but for my money. It's basically telling my money exactly where I want it to go. Because without that, I'm kind of just fumbling around in the dark. Not good, not sensible. But with my budget, I know exactly when my money is coming in. I know what I want to spend it on and when I want to spend it on those things. I know whether it's covering essentials. I know whether it's going into savings. I know whether it's going into investments, or whether it's paying off a debt that I've accrued. I know exactly where it's going. Really, instead of limiting my options, my budget actually opens up my options. It gives me this peace of mind and freedom to know I'm covered for these things. If I want to do that, I might have to move some stuff around. I can spend without guilt, knowing that I've already set this money aside for spending. This fun money is for me to have a good time with. And so I won't feel guilty about doing that. Lesson number 7.5. You probably have a subscription to something you don't even need. I think we're all guilty of being oversubscribed these days. It can't be just me. I think we're all in it, especially with this temptation of like small monthly payments that don't feel like anything. Amazon Prime, $8.99. Apple TV, $10.99. Netflix, $11.99. Spotify. They sound like little tiny payments until you add them up and you realize you're spending like 100 quid on subscriptions. And then before you know it, your bank account is literally groaning under the weight of all these subscriptions that you signed up for. And friend, let's be realistic. Who needs all these TV shows? Like, how many TV shows do we actually need? Do I really need all these things? Do I even have the time to watch all these shows? So what I did is I literally sat down and just took the time to go through all my subscriptions and to see, what do I need? What do I not need? Need is the wrong word. Technically, we don't need any of them, but like, what do I want versus what's a nice to have? And for me, I realized that I love Spotify because I love my music and my podcasts and my audiobooks, and I love Apple TV and I love Amazon Prime. All the others had to go. And the thing is, I haven't missed them. I really thought I would die without Netflix. I'm not even being dramatic here. I really thought my life would cease to have meaning if I didn't have Netflix. Beloved, my life is perfectly fine. I haven't died. I didn't melt into a puddle of hot chocolate. I'm fine. Life without Netflix is fine. Every single pound counts, and just trimming the fat from your list of subscriptions means you're not just decluttering your finances, but you're also making room for more experiences without the financial strain. Those are the 7.5 things that I wish I learned sooner. I wish someone had told me these things sooner. I hope they offer some insights and help you to avoid some of the missteps that I made. Listen, personal finance doesn't actually have to be daunting. Learning how to manage your money doesn't have to be complicated. Often it's these little tiny things repeated over time that gets you to where you want to go. My drink's almost over, but cheers to making smarter money moves.